The orbital shipyards around Luna had never seen activity like this before. Admiral Park Jin-soo stood on the observation deck of Construction Platform 7, watching thousands of workers and robots move around the largest structure ever built. By human hands, the Leviathan-Class Dreadnought stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with armor plating that had been forged in the hearts of artificial stars. Every resource that Earth and its colonies could spare had been poured into this single vessel. The best minds from every nation worked together, sharing knowledge that had once been jealously guarded. State secrets, scientists from Korea, Japan, Brazil, Germany, and dozens of other countries collaborated on technologies that pushed the boundaries of what humans thought possible. Dr. Lee Hai-jin hurried across the construction platform, her tablet displaying readouts that still amazed her after months of testing. The artificial gravity generators they had developed could create localized gravitational fields strong enough to crush asteroids into diamond. The power requirements were enormous, but they had solved that problem by building fusion reactors based on the same principles that lit the sun. Admiral, the gravity systems are performing beyond our wildest expectations, she reported. Her voice carried excitement that she could not hide. We can generate gravitational anomalies on command, create artificial black holes that last for precisely calculated periods. The applications for both offense and defense are incredible. Admiral Park studied the technical readouts with satisfaction. The alien technologies that humanity had been quietly studying for the past decade were finally bearing fruit. But more importantly, they had not simply copied what others had done. They had improved on alien designs, combined them with human innovations, and created something entirely new, deep within the ship's hull. Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho supervised teams installing weapon systems that no other species had ever conceived. The older galactic civilizations had spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, and photon torpedoes. They had developed shields that could stop almost any form of directed energy and armor that could absorb and redirect electromagnetic attacks, but they had apparently forgotten about the devastating simplicity of throwing very heavy objects very fast. The Leviathan's main battery consisted of magnetic acceleration cannons that could fire solid projectiles at 90% the speed of light. Each slug was made from materials harder than diamond and powered by magnetic fields generated by miniaturized fusion reactors. The kinetic energy released when these projectiles hit their targets was equivalent to nuclear weapons. We are not just building a warship, Choi explained to his engineering teams as they worked. We are building a statement about human ingenuity. The aliens have forgotten that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. They have energy shields that can stop laser beams and particle streams, but they have no defense against a chunk of metal moving at near light speed. The ship buzzed with constant activity as specialist teams installed systems that had been developed in secret laboratories around the solar system. The propulsion system used gravitational manipulation to achieve faster than light travel without the need for the jump gates that other civilizations relied on. This meant the Leviathan could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Captain Hwang Soo-bin, the woman chosen to command this incredible vessel, walked through corridors filled with the most advanced technology humanity had ever produced. But she was not looking at the machines and computers. Instead, she was watching the people, the crew of 12,000 men and women who would take this ship into battle against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Unlike alien vessels that relied on artificial intelligence or hive minds to coordinate their operations, the Leviathan would be crewed entirely by humans. Each person had been trained not just in their primary specialty but in at least 3 backup roles. This redundancy meant that the ship could continue fighting, even if major sections were damaged or destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Nam Da-yoon walked beside Captain Hwang, reviewing crew readiness reports. Every department from weapons to medical to food service had been drilled until their responses were automatic. The crew had trained in simulated battles against opponents based on every known alien technology. They had practiced fighting in conditions that ranged from zero gravity to the crushing pressure of gas giant atmospheres. Commander Jang Woo-sung joined them carrying tactical analyses that had been developed by studying every recorded encounter with the Void Swarm. The aliens always fought the same way he explained. They used energy weapons and force fields trying to outrun creatures that moved through space like predators through an ocean. But we are going to do something different. We are going to turn the hunt around. The final component of their preparation was something that could not be built or programmed, but had to be cultivated. The human crew's ability to adapt and improvise under pressure. Every simulation included unexpected complications that forced the crew to develop solutions on the spot. This was the advantage that humanity brought to space warfare. Not superior technology, but superior flexibility. Dr. Li Hai-jin presented her final reports to Captain Huang in the ship's main conference room. The walls displayed holographic models of void swarm bioships showing their organic hulls and living weapon systems. These creatures are unlike anything we have faced before. She said the alien reports describe organisms that can adapt their biology in real time, developing new abilities to counter whatever weapons are used against them. They learn from every encounter, becoming more dangerous with each battle captain. Huang studied the holographic creatures with professional interest. That is exactly what makes them vulnerable, she said. They have spent thousands of years adapting to the same types of weapons and tactics. The older civilizations fight in predictable ways, using technologies that have not changed significantly in millennia, but we are going to introduce variables that they have never encountered. The construction teams worked around the clock as reports arrived from across the galaxy. The Void Swarm had consumed 3 more worlds, including a major industrial center that had supplied weapons to half the outer rim. The alien fleet sent to stop them had been destroyed or forced to retreat, leaving entire star systems defenseless. Admiral Park received updates from intelligence networks throughout human space. Every colony, every outpost, and every exploration vessel had been placed on high alert. If the Leviathan failed to stop the swarm, humanity would need to evacuate its outer settlements and prepare for a siege that could last generations. But there was also encouraging news, arriving from unexpected sources. Several alien species had quietly begun sharing intelligence about Void Swarm behavior and tactics. These were not the proud delegates who had laughed in the council chamber, but practical military officers who understood that this threat affected everyone in the galaxy. The Keth battle commanders provided detailed scans of swarm bioships showing weak points in their organic armor. The Ethereal Collective shared sensor data revealing how the creatures communicated and coordinated their attacks. Even some Vorthan officers contributed information about swarm feeding patterns and reproductive cycles. It seemed that while the official representatives of these species viewed humanity with contempt, their military leaders recognized that the newcomers might have advantages that traditional approaches lacked. The warriors who actually fought the swarm were willing to work with anyone who offered hope of victory as the Leviathan neared completion. Captain Huang gathered her senior staff for final briefings. The ship that surrounded them represented the greatest achievement in human history, but it was also an enormous gamble. If they succeeded, they would earn humanity's place among the galactic powers. If they failed, they would likely doom their entire species. The aliens expect us to fight like they do, she told her officers. They expect us to use energy weapons and try to outrun our enemies. They expect us to follow the same tactical doctrines that have failed for thousands of years. But we are going to do something they will never see coming. We are going to fight like humans. Commander Nam raised a concern that had been troubling many of the crew. The reports suggest these creatures can adapt to any attack method. What if they learn to counter our weapons as quickly as they have countered everything else? Captain Huang smiled with confidence that she hoped was contagious. Then we will adapt faster, she said. The one thing these creatures have never faced is an enemy that refuses to be predictable. We will not give them time to study our methods or develop counters to our tactics. We are going to hit them with everything we have and finish the fight before they understand what happened. The final systems came online as Earth received word that the Void Swarm had begun moving toward inhabited systems. The creatures seemed to sense that something new was preparing to challenge them, and they were gathering their forces for what might be the largest offensive in galactic history. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the completed Leviathan as the massive ship prepared to depart lunar orbit. The vessel around him represented not just advanced technology, but the hopes and dreams of an entire species. They had built their greatest weapon not to conquer or intimidate, but to prove they belonged among the stars. The crew took their positions with calm. The bioships moved through space like a living storm, their organic hulls pulsing with patterns of light that seemed to communicate pure hunger and rage. The Void Swarm had expected the human vessel to flee like all the others, but instead the Leviathan held its position and continued firing with weapons that the creatures had never encountered before. Commander Jiang Wu-sung coordinated the defensive systems from his tactical station as streams of bioplasma torpedoes raced toward them. Incoming projectiles bearing 27 Mark IV, he called out. All-point defense batteries engage at will. The ship's hull bristled with thousands of small railguns that tracked the organic missiles with computer-guided precision. The defensive weapons created a web of fire around the Leviathan as hypervelocity projectiles intercepted the bioplasma torpedoes in spectacular explosions. Most of the organic weapons were destroyed before they could reach the ship, but some got through splashing against the armored hull with the sound of acid rain on metal. Dr. Lee Hai-jin monitored damage reports from her science station while analyzing the effects of the bioweapons' hull integrity holding at 96%. She reported, "The new composite armor is actually performing better than our projections. The bioacid is causing molecular bonding that makes the outer layer stronger rather than weaker." The irony was not lost on Captain Huang that weapons designed to dissolve alien hull materials were actually improving human defenses. These creatures had spent thousands of years adapting to fight enemies that used conventional materials and construction techniques. They had never encountered the advanced composites that human scientists had developed by combining technologies from dozens of different alien civilizations. But the bioships were learning with terrifying speed. The creatures began to change their attack patterns and weapon configurations as they fought. New organs appeared on their hulls while existing structures shifted and modified themselves. The acid they fired became more concentrated and corrosive with each volley as their biology adapted to counter human defensive materials. Lieutenant Song Ki-young watched his sensor displays with growing concern. "Admiral, the bioships are modifying themselves in real time. They are developing new capabilities specifically designed to counter our weapons and defenses. Some of the larger organisms are growing what appear to be kinetic dampening fields." Captain Huang smiled grimly as she watched the tactical display. "Good, let them adapt to our weapons. All hands prepare for Phase 2 of Operation Whale Hunt. Engineering, activate the gravity mines deep within." The Leviathan chief engineer Choi Min-ho initiated systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The ship began releasing devices that looked like metallic seeds, but contained technology that pushed the boundaries of physics. Each gravity mine housed a miniaturized black hole contained within exotic matter fields and controlled by quantum computers. The bioships sensed something was wrong, but their senses had evolved to detect energy signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and biological markers. The gravity mines produced none of these warning signs. Instead, they drifted silently through space until they reached predetermined positions throughout the swarm formation. When the mines activated, reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Around them, sudden wells of twisted spacetime appeared throughout the bioship formations, pulling the organic vessels toward points where gravity became so intense that atomic bonds began to break apart. The creatures found themselves stretched and compressed by tidal forces that no living thing was designed to survive. Dozens of bioships were caught in the gravitational anomalies, their hulls screaming in frequencies that made the human crew cover their ears. The organic armor that could adapt to energy weapons and chemical attacks had no defense against fundamental forces that warped the fabric of space and time itself. But even as their companions died, the surviving creatures continued to evolve. New organs appeared that seemed designed to detect gravitational disturbances, while existing structures were modified to provide resistance against tidal forces. The Void Swarm was learning to counter weapons that should have been impossible to defend against. Commander Nam Da-yoon watched the adaptation process with professional fascination and growing alarm. "These things are not just intelligent, Admiral. They are evolutionarily perfect. They can modify their biology to counter any threat within minutes of first encountering." Yet the bridge crew could see the truth of this statement. As bioships that had been vulnerable to gravity weapons began developing new defensive capabilities. Some creatures grew additional mass concentrations that helped them resist tidal forces, while others developed what appeared to be organic gravity generators that created counterfields. Dr. Lee analyzed the biological changes with instruments that had been designed to study the most advanced alien technologies. What we are seeing should be impossible, she said. These creatures are rewriting their genetic code in real time while maintaining consciousness and coordination. They are treating evolutionary adaptation like we would treat changing weapon configurations. Captain Huang watched the tactical display as more bioships emerged from hyperspace to join the battle. The creatures were not just adapting individually, but sharing their modifications across the entire swarm. Each successful adaptation was being copied by every organism in the formation, creating a collective intelligence that could evolve solutions faster than any individual species. The situation was becoming exactly what the alien reports had warned about. The Void Swarm was turning the battle into a learning experience, adapting to human weapons and tactics with each passing moment. Soon they would develop complete immunity to everything the Leviathan could throw at them, unless the humans did something that no other species had ever attempted. All hands. Prepare for Operation Deep Strike, Captain Huang announced. We are taking this fight to the source, Chief Engineer. Prepare the atmospheric systems for liquid environment operations. We are going inside the planet. The bridge crew exchanged glances that mixed excitement with terror. The plan they were about to execute had never been attempted by any species in galactic history. No one had ever tried to fight the Void Swarm in their own element by entering the converted planets where they reproduced and grew their numbers. Commander Zhang studied the tactical display showing the hollowed-out planet, where thousands more bioships were gestating in organic nurseries. If we can destroy their breeding facility, we might be able to eliminate this entire swarm cluster before they can spread to other systems. But the risks were enormous. The planet had been completely converted into a hostile environment designed to support alien biology. The atmosphere was toxic. The oceans had been replaced with organic compounds that could dissolve most known materials, and the entire world was defended by creatures that had evolved specifically for this type of warfare. Dr. Lee provided additional analysis of the planetary conversion. Admiral the Bio. Readings suggest that the planet has been turned into a single massive organism. The entire world is essentially one giant swarm creature with smaller bioships growing inside it like organs in a body. The Leviathan began moving toward the converted planet while continuing to fight off attacks from the bioships around them. The human weapons were still effective, but the creatures were adapting faster than expected. Soon they would need to rely on tactics and strategies rather than technological superiority. First Officer Nam coordinated with all department heads as the ship prepared for the most dangerous part of their mission. We are going to attempt something that has never been done before, she announced to the crew. We are going to enter a swarm planet and destroy it from the inside. The bioships seemed to sense their intention and began coordinating attacks designed to prevent the human vessel from reaching the planet. But Captain Huang had one more surprise: that the creatures would not be able to adapt to quickly enough. All weapons target the largest bioship in the formation, she ordered. We are going to punch a hole through their defenses and show these creatures what human determination looks like when we refuse to give up. The Leviathan weapons fired in concentrated volleys that overwhelmed the defenses of a bioship the size of a small moon. The creature exploded in a ball of organic fire that illuminated the entire star system, while the human vessel flew through the expanding debris cloud toward its final destination. Behind them, the surviving bioships gave chase, their hulls glowing with new adaptations, as they prepared for a battle unlike any they had fought in their thousands of years of existence. The hunt was about to become a race to see whether human ingenuity could overcome alien evolution in the depths of a world that had been turned into a living nightmare. The Kepler colony had been humanity's proudest achievement beyond the solar system. 50,000 people had built a thriving civilization on a world of blue oceans and purple forests. The colonists had established farms that worked with alien soil chemistry and cities that blended human architecture with the natural beauty of their adopted home. Children had been born there who considered the purple trees and twin moons to be as natural as Earth's sunshine. Now it was gone. Captain Huang, Su Bin stood on the bridge of the Leviathan staring at sensor readings that told a story of complete devastation. The planet that had once been a garden world was now a hollow shell. The void swarm had burrowed to its core, consuming the molten rock and metals that formed the planet's foundation. What remained was a thin crust of surface material that would collapse within hours. The creatures responsible for this destruction moved through the system like a living cancer. Each bioship was the size of a cruiser, but unlike any vessel built by intelligent species. These organisms had no rigid hull or mechanical components. Instead, they possessed organic armor that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns and could repair itself in real time. Their weapons were living tissues that fired streams of acid capable of melting through any known material. Lieutenant Song Ki. Young studied his sensor displays with professional calm that did not quite hide his horror. Admiral, we are detecting 3,200 individual organisms ranging in size from frigate to battleship equivalent. They appear to be operating as a single entity, with perfect coordination between all units. The tactical display showed the bioships moving in, complex patterns as they continued to strip resources from the dying planet. Some creatures attached themselves directly to the surface using tentacles that could stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Others swam through the thin atmosphere like jellyfish through water, harvesting gases and minerals that had been processed by the planet's dying ecosystems. First Officer Nam Da-yun analyzed the movement patterns with growing understanding. These things do not fight like ships, Admiral. They move like a school of predatory fish or a pack of wolves hunting together. The coordination is too perfect to be achieved through any communication system, we understand. Captain Huang watched the creatures feeding on what had once been human homes. The colony had been evacuated when long-range sensors detected the approaching swarm. But 50 years of human dreams and achievements were being consumed by monsters that existed only to devour and multiply. On the main display, one of the larger bioships came into clear view. The creature looked like a nightmare fusion of jellyfish and machine. Its translucent body revealed internal organs that pulsed with different colored lights, while metallic veins carried some kind of conductive fluid through tissues that should not have been able to conduct electricity. Tentacles covered in what looked like metallic scales reached out to grab chunks of planetary debris and pull them into a mouth that opened along the entire underside of the organism. Dr. Li Haijin worked at the science station analyzing the bioships with sensors that had been designed to study alien technology. These readings are unlike anything in our databases, she reported. The creatures appear to be using biological processes to achieve effects that we would require advanced technology to duplicate. They are converting matter directly into energy at the cellular level and using organic superconductors to generate magnetic fields stronger than our artificial systems. Commander Jiang Wu Sung studied tactical options while watching the creatures feed. Most alien encounters with the swarm follow predictable patterns, he said. The defenders try to establish a perimeter and fight a conventional battle using energy weapons and defensive screens. But these things are not conventional opponents. They adapt to whatever is used against them and become stronger with each encounter. The bridge crew could see the truth of this statement as they watched. Several of the bioships were different from the others, showing modifications that had not been present in earlier sensor scans. The creatures were already adapting to the electromagnetic signatures produced by the Leviathan's advanced sensors, developing new organs that could detect and counter human technology. Captain Huang made her decision. All hands, general quarters. This is not a drill. We are going to engage the void swarm and show them what happens when they threaten human colonies. The ship around her came alive as 12,000 crew members moved to battle stations with practiced efficiency. But as the Leviathan prepared for combat, something unexpected happened on the sensor displays. The bioships that had been feeding on the planet suddenly stopped their activity. The creatures turned toward the human vessel with movements that seemed almost curious rather than aggressive. For several minutes, the two forces studied each other across the empty space of the star system. Lieutenant Song reported additional contacts emerging from hyperspace. Admiral, multiple bioship formations are arriving from nearby systems. Current count is approaching 8,000 individual organisms. They appear to be responding to some kind of summons. The Tactical situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. The Void Swarm was gathering forces from across the region, as if the creatures somehow sensed that this human ship represented a new type of threat. More bioships continued to arrive, materializing from hyperspace in formations that defied conventional physics. Dr. Lee studied the new arrivals with growing fascination. Admiral, these creatures are not using technology to achieve faster-than-light travel. They are somehow manipulating space-time through biological processes. Their entire approach to physics is fundamentally different from anything we have encountered. Commander Nam monitored defensive systems as the bioships began to move toward them in perfect coordination. The approaching organisms were beautiful in a terrifying way, their translucent bodies glowing with internal light as they swam through vacuum with movements that looked like an underwater ballet performed by nightmares. But Captain Huang had noticed something that the alien reports had not mentioned. The swarm creatures were not immediately adapting to the Leviathan's presence the way they reportedly adapted to other ships. Instead, they seemed to be studying the human vessel with what might have been confusion or uncertainty. That is because we are not fighting them the way everyone else has, she said with growing confidence. All weapons prepare to engage. We are going to introduce these creatures to human warfare and show them why our species earned its place among the stars. The Leviathan's main batteries powered up with a sound that could be felt through the ship's massive hull. The magnetic acceleration cannons had never been fired at living targets, but their test results had been devastating against asteroid targets. Each weapon could launch projectiles with kinetic energy, equivalent to nuclear warheads. On the sensor display, the bioships continued their approach in formations that looked organic rather than military. They moved like living things swimming through an ocean of stars, completely unlike the rigid geometric patterns used by conventional spacecraft. The largest creatures were easily the size of Earth battleships, while the smallest were still larger than human fighters. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the range closed to optimal firing distance. The bioships made no threatening moves, but their very presence was a threat to every living thing in the galaxy. These creatures had consumed civilizations that were ancient when humanity was still learning to use fire all weapons, Captain Huang said quietly. The Leviathan's main guns spoke with voices like thunder. The magnetic acceleration cannons launched streams of projectiles moving at 90% light speed toward targets that had never faced kinetic weapons of this magnitude. The hypervelocity slugs crossed the space between the ships in fractions of a second. The effects were immediate and spectacular. Bioships that had survived energy weapons capable of melting planets were torn apart by solid projectiles that hit with the force of falling asteroids. The organic hulls that could adapt to any energy attack had no defense against simple kinetic force delivered. At relativistic speeds, dozens of creatures exploded in brilliant flashes as metal slugs moving at near light speed tore through their bodies like bullets through tissue paper. The beautiful bioluminescent patterns that had covered their hulls were replaced by expanding clouds of organic debris that sparkled with their own dying light. But the Void Swarm response was swift and terrifying. The surviving bioships abandoned their feeding and rushed toward the Leviathan with speed that defied physics. Their organic weapons began firing streams of bioplasma that could eat through starship armor in seconds, while new defensive organs appeared on their hulls in real time. The real test of human engineering was about to begin as creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia learned that the newcomers from Earth fought with weapons and tactics that no one had used against them before. The bioships moved like living lightning through space, while the Leviathan stood its ground and prepared to show the swarm what humans could do when they refused to run from monsters. The great crystal hall of the Galactic Council stretched so far that humans could barely see the other end. Captain Kim Day walked across the smooth floor, his boots making small clicking sounds in the vast space. Around him, thousands of alien beings sat in floating chairs that moved without any visible technology. Their forms were so strange that Day had spent months just learning how to tell one species from another. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms and legs. Others appeared to be made of living gas that shifted colors as they moved. The Keth delegation resembled huge lizards with scales that reflected light like mirrors, while the Vorthan representatives had crystal skin that chimed softly when they moved their six. Arms gestured constantly as they spoke in musical tones that hurt human ears. At the center of this massive gathering sat the architect, an ancient being so old that no one remembered what species he had originally belonged to. His body was a mixture of metal organic parts and pure energy contained in a shell that looked like it had been carved from a single black diamond. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Ambassador Yoon. So Ra watched from the viewing gallery reserved for guests and observers. Her hands gripped the railing as she saw Captain Day standing alone in the center of all those alien eyes. She had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, learning alien languages, studying their customs, and trying to understand how their politics worked. But nothing could have prepared her for the sheer overwhelming presence of beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humans discovered fire. Day cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice carried clearly through the hall's advanced sound system. The words he spoke had been practiced thousands of times, refined by the best diplomats on Earth, and approved by every government on the planet. "We come before this ancient council as representatives of humanity," he said, looking up at the floating platforms around him. "We have achieved faster than light travel in just 50 years since our first steps into space. We have built cities on Mars and Europa. We have mining stations around Jupiter and Saturn. We have explored 12 star systems and established colonies on 4 worlds. We believe we are ready to join the Galactic Council as equals." The silence that followed his words was so complete that Day could hear his own heartbeat. Then somewhere in the vast hall, someone began to laugh. It started as a small chuckling sound but quickly grew louder. Other aliens joined in until the entire chamber echoed with laughter that ranged from musical chimes to harsh barking sounds to vibrations that humans could feel in their bones rather than hear. The Vorthan ambassador rose from his floating seat, his crystal body catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. His 6 arms moved in complex patterns as he spoke, and his voice sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. "These humans think they are ready to stand with us," he said, and his words triggered fresh waves of laughter. "We who have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We who built the jump gates that connect the galaxy. We who defeated the machine gods and tamed the void storms. Your entire species. Captain Day is younger than my morning meditation." A massive creature from the Grex Confederation stood up next. Its body looked like a cross between a tree and a spider, with bark-covered limbs that reached in all directions. When it spoke, its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "I have personally witnessed the rise and fall of 16 civilizations," the Grex delegate said. "Some lasted for millennia and produced wonders that still amaze us today. Others burned bright for a few centuries before fading into memory. You humans have barely learned to leave your home system, and you think you can sit among the powers that shaped this galaxy." The laughter continued and grew louder. Ambassador Yoon felt her cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. She had expected skepticism, perhaps even some condescension, but this level of mockery felt like a physical blow. Captain Day, however, remained perfectly still, his face showing no emotion as alien after alien stood to share their amusement at humanity's presumption. The ethereal collective sent waves of what might have been laughter through the chamber. Their gaseous forms pulsed with colors that hurt to look at directly while they communicated in frequencies that made the humans' viewing gallery vibrate. One of them managed to form words that the translation systems could interpret. "We have watched species like yours before," they said in voices that sounded like whispers from a tomb. "They appear in the galaxy full of pride and ambition. They build a few ships, explore a few systems, and convince themselves they are ready to join the great game. Most destroy themselves within a generation. Those who survive usually spend the next 1,000 years learning humility." Captain Day waited for the laughter to die down before he spoke again. His voice remained calm and steady, even though Yoon could see the tension in his shoulders. "We may be young," he said, "but we learn quickly. We adapt to new challenges and overcome obstacles that would stop others. Give us a chance to prove what humanity can do." This triggered a fresh round of alien amusement. Several delegates began sharing stories of other young species who had made similar claims. The Corvan hegemony told of a race called the Builders, who had created magnificent cities before vanishing overnight. The Plasma Lords described the Wanderers who had developed incredible technology only to use it to destroy themselves in civil wars that lasted centuries. Through all of this, the architect remained silent, his ancient form perfectly still on his floating throne. When the laughter finally began to fade, he raised one massive hand, and the entire chamber fell silent. The gesture was so commanding that even the most arrogant delegates immediately stopped talking. "Very well, human," the architect said, and his voice carried weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. "You wish to prove yourselves worthy of joining this council? Then you shall have your opportunity." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a region of space at the galaxy's edge. The stars there looked wrong, somehow dimmer than they should be, and some seemed to be flickering like candles in wind. "The void swarm has returned to the outer rim," the architect continued, and his words sent visible shudders through many of the alien delegates. "They are creatures of pure hunger that consume entire worlds and leave nothing but empty space behind. They have destroyed 12 civilizations in the past month, and our combined fleets cannot stop them." The hologram zoomed in to show creatures that looked like nightmare versions of jellyfish crossed with spaceships. Their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while tentacles that could wrap around moons reached out to grab planets and pull them apart. The sight made several human observers in the gallery feel sick. "If your species can stop the void swarm where our greatest warriors have failed," the architect said, "then we will consider granting you membership in this council. But know this, human, the swarm has devoured civilizations that existed when your son was young. They learn from every battle and adapt to counter any weapon used against them. Many consider them unstoppable." Captain Dai did not hesitate for even a moment. "We accept," he said. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of amusement or contempt, but of shock and perhaps a little fear. Several delegates began whispering among themselves in languages that their translation devices could not interpret. The Vorthan ambassador leaned forward, his crystal body ringing like bells. "You do not understand what you have just agreed to," he said. "The void swarm is not merely dangerous, it is apocalyptic. They turn entire star systems into feeding grounds. They corrupt space-time itself, making it impossible for ships to escape once they arrive. They have weapons that feed on the energy of stars and armor that grow stronger when damaged." Day nodded respectfully. "Thank you for the warning, Ambassador. We will take all of this into account when we make our preparations." As the human delegation prepared to leave the chamber, alien voices followed them. Some called it suicide. Others wondered if these strange bipedal creatures truly understood what they had committed themselves to fight. A few even expressed something that might have been admiration for their courage, even if they considered it foolish. Ambassador Yoon walked beside Captain Day as they headed for their shuttle. She could not contain her concern any longer. "Do we actually have a plan for fighting these things?" she asked quietly. Day smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "We will," he said. "Earth has been preparing for something like this. Ever since we first learned we were not alone in the universe, our scientists have been studying every piece of alien technology we could get our hands on. Our military has been developing weapons and strategies based on the assumption that we would one day face enemies far more advanced than ourselves." He paused at the shuttle door and looked back at the crystal chamber where the council continued their deliberations. "The aliens laugh at us because they think we are primitive and naive," he said, "but they forget something important about young species. We have not yet learned what is supposed to be impossible." The planet's surface had been transformed into something that human minds could barely comprehend. What had once been continents and oceans was now a landscape of organic structures that pulsed with alien life. The former mountains had become massive, feeding organs that reached toward space, while the valleys had been converted into nursery pools, where new bioships grew like fruit on nightmare trees. Captain Huang stared at the main display as the Leviathan descended toward the converted world. The atmosphere itself was alive, writhing with creatures too small to see individually, but forming patterns that looked like neural networks spanning the entire planet. The air glowed with bioluminescent particles that seemed to communicate information about the approaching human vessel. Lieutenant Song Ki-young reported readings that challenged everything they knew about planetary science. Admiral, the entire world has been converted into a single biological entity. The crust, the atmosphere, and even the magnetic field are all part of one massive organism. We are essentially approaching a planet-sized creature. The tactical display showed structures on the surface that defied classification. Towers made of what looked like crystallized bone reached heights that would have been impossible under normal physics, while organic bridges spanning hundreds of kilometers connected feeding centers that processed the remains of the original ecosystem. Dr. Lee Hai-jin analyzed the biological readings with instruments that had been designed to study the most complex alien technologies. The conversion process appears to have taken decades, she reported. The swarm did not simply destroy this world. They carefully transformed it into an optimal breeding environment. Every aspect of the planetary system has been redesigned to support their reproduction. As the Leviathan entered the atmosphere, the ship began taking damage from sources that conventional sensors could not identify. The protective fields that had worked perfectly in space were being overwhelmed by attacks that seemed to come from the air itself. Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho worked frantically to adapt their defenses. Hull temperature rising beyond safe parameters, he reported. The atmosphere is not just toxic, it is actively trying to break down